Hey guys, welcome back. We're talking about dashboards today and how can we create a dashboard using call center data. So, one of the things that we want to talk about first is the types of things that we can create using uh, call center data. So, let me give you an example. So, I brought in some call center data from this really cool site on the um, the Data World website called Real World Fake Data, RWFD, Real World Fake Data. So basically, using fake data across different industries and utilizing that data and its different characteristics to build dashboards out of it. So a really cool site to just get downloaded data and then just practice with the data and create a dashboard in Tableau for that. So I brought in some call center data. Before we actually dig into the call center data, let's talk about the concept of call centers and the types of data, the data elements that we would get from that, right? So I have experience working with call center data in previous jobs. I've worked with data in SAS. I've worked with data in SQL, and I've visualized it in Tableau. So, what are some of the things that we can get out of call center data? So, one of the things is we can use that data to score performance of our contact center agents. How efficient are they? How many calls are they taking? If they are um, in a, let's say, in a sales environment, how many calls do they turn into sales? Uh, we can also look at call durations, predetermined service level agreements. Are they actually handling all their calls within those service level agreements? We can look at, as I mentioned before, conversion rates. We can look at transfer rates. Obviously, as a consumer, it's very cumbersome and tedious, right? Getting passed around like a pinball, right, from one call center agent to the other. So, in order to have a really good experience for the consumer, we want to limit those transfers as much as possible. We also want to look at escalation. How many times is a call escalated? Is it different agent to agent? So that gives us somewhat of a pulse on the performance or the competency of those contact center agents, which could lead to changes in hiring, changes in training, even changes in how we want to, uh, I guess, ready the queues for the agents. We can also look at it in terms of overall call infrastructure. Let's say, for instance, we're getting a lot of call abandons, right? And what that is you're holding for an agent, you wait too long, you get tired of it, and you abandon the call and call later. That's a bad customer experience. We don't want that to happen. So if we start to see a spike in abandon rates, then that could be something that we could look into further. Where is it a staffing issue? Is it an issue with the infrastructure of the phone environment? Those are little things that can tip off how we can make the operation a little bit more efficient. We also want to see are we uncovering issues with coverage? Let's say, for instance, we get a seasonal effect of calls, right, over a given period of week. Let's say we get the most calls between Mondays and Tuesdays, whereas Friday, Saturday, and Sunday you don't get as much calls. So that can give some type of credence to coverage and how you want to, make sure you have the accurate amount of coverage for the forecasted number of calls we expect to get on those days. That can save us money in terms of expenses on agents, in terms of expenses if you're paying by day for call infrastructure. We can also look at it for, building the average profile of a caller. If you're in a pretty sophisticated contact center, then you know who's calling. Specifically, if it's a returning customer calling to get service on an existing product, then you already have the information of the customer out there. You know what their tenure is, you know what their age is, how long they've been with the company, their likes, their dislikes, how many times they've called in the past. So all this historical data is ammunition for you to build an accurate rendering or a profile of the type of caller that we can anticipate handling in the future. Uh, let's say, for instance, we also know the types of call dispositions that agents provide on each of those calls. So then we can actually plot what type of call dispositions are stemming the largest call durations. Why aren't we better equipped in handling these types of dispositions. This can give us an insight as to how to train better for the agents. Does customer tenure have a correlation to call intent? All these are questions that we can answer with call center data. And let's not also forget too that if you have a really robust call center data platform in partnership with a really robust rewards program or post call satisfaction process or campaign, then you can actually join that call center data with your CSAT scores and see, you know, which agents have the best satisfaction scores, which types of calls get the best satisfaction scores, which ones are you know bringing up the rear in terms of satisfaction, and how can we increase those types of sentiments to those calls. So there are lots of things that we can do with call center data. As you see on the screen here, I created a call center dashboard for that data set I downloaded. It's a call center data, fake data from the Data World website. I do have a link to that page on my blog. Real quick, lots of things to show here. Um, Notice how I created some bands up here that kind of breaks up the volume of calls by type of call, whether it's handled in the call center, chatbot, email, web, and then I have a rendering. This is only a month of data that I was given. So this is the service level percentage, the service level performance rate for each of these channels. And then I have a spark line, which I created right here, right underneath it. So it gives you a rendering of that same service level percentage over the month and how it's performed day by day. I've also taken sentiment as a dimension to utilizing a tree map. So if you see below here, you can see the largest ones displayed are negative sentiment. So immediately we can go to these and see which calls those are. If you have a really big portal or system where you can listen in on calls, because nowadays everything's recorded, you can go back to those calls, have listening sessions, try to understand why this turned out to be a negative sentiment type call. I also have the volume here spread out by day. Notice how I basically brought in the channel and separated the calls by day. So this is our web calls here. This is our email calls, chatbot call center calls. So I have a bar chart representing the volume of calls. And then I have a dual axis chart, a Gantt chart representing the level of service level agreement that the service level percentage has been yielded for that day. I also was able to plot these calls, these cohort of calls by city and state. So I used double layers here, a layer for state, a layer for city, and then was able to plot the calls represented by these circle marks across the state. So you can kind of see where the red states are the heavy populated calls. So Texas, 3,500 calls, and then within each city, you can see the number of calls represented. I broke out the calls too by type. So there's three types that was in the data set. There's a billing question, there's payments, and then there's service outage. Um, the one thing I did notice was I was trying to see if this fake data also came with some fake insights, um, where maybe we can dig into it deeper and see, oh, okay, there's a lot more billing calls or there's a lot more payment calls. But for the most part, it's all pretty uniformed. You know, Nothing wrong with that. It's fake data. Someone created it for us, so I'm very thankful for that, so that we can create this dashboard. And then I actually created two actions. Let me show you those actions up front on the window here. So hopefully you can see this. There's a filter action, and then there's two highlighted actions. So I did a filter action on the bands. So by clicking on these band titles, it changes everything around it. and then I created a highlight action. So, for instance, notice how I clicked on call center and everything's changed to show me call center specific data, even down to the tree map and the map here. So I have a comment here. Clicking on call center channel will filter the rest of the views in the dashboard. I should probably change that to just channel because call center is a very specific channel. So if I unclick that, it goes back to everything. Let's click on email. Same effect. And then I also have a highlight action. So if I highlight over here the specific day, notice how the days on all the other kind of bar charts are illuminated as well. So this is a really quick feature to kind of examine. Let's say I wanted to examine email for this specific day, to where I see the dip. I can click on email, click on the day, and immediately see the 22nd and what happened that day. We got a lot more email, got a lot of billing questions, service outage questions here, the service level percentage at that time. And then you can also kind of play around with this. So the one thing I like about this feature, the actions and dashboard, is you can actually use one tile here. So in essence, the bands, and these control everything else that you see here. Um, Now, alternatively, you can actually go deeper. You can say, let's do one on state. Let's do one where I click on state North Dakota, and it changes everything around for the state specifically. Um, that might be something that you can apply in your dashboard. Let's say if you wanted to look at something specific by state, let's say you have some regional managers that are only in charge of certain states, then that might be a function that you can apply in this case for someone that wants to handle specific calls, or how to better kind of strategically place agents to handle those type of calls. So, quick thoughts on this. I like it. I like the bands and the spark lines. Pretty cool here. I was able to create it all in one chart, so you can notice how one tile, the uh, the bands here is all one tile from one view, and then I basically replicated um, the same kind of view here for the spark lines, but I just took out the headers and the access to show the spark line itself. I like this. It's really simple. It shows you the high level metrics that you want to show in terms of this data set. All we were able to kind of create is service level percentage, maybe a positive rate percentage, some sentiment analysis. Let me show you real quick the calculation I created for service level SLA percentage. So I basically took the sum of the SLA, which is another calculation I created, over the count of ID. ID specific to the actual call. So just by counting the ID, I'm able to get a volume of calls. So now let's look at this SLA formula. Simple if statement: if response time is equal to above SLA or within SLA, then I count it, or else I don't count it. So the response time, as we can see here, is a dimension that comes from the data set. So there's only three values: above, below, and within SLA. So using this kind of nomenclature, I just basically did an if statement on above and within, and I counted that as a call that met SLA. And that's where I got my SLA percentage. Another thing, I tried to work around some other things too. I did a combination of channel and sentiment. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to look at, grouping up the channel and the sentiment. I did that for the tree map, but it really made it really confusing. It made it really noisy. So I decided to just to do the tree map with the sentiment by itself. Let's look at the sheets. So here's the bands one, real quick. I just added the channel, the columns, brought in the SLA calculation under the mark for text, made it an entire view, and then I was able to bring that in as a band. Same for the spark lines, same kind of setup, channel and columns. I brought in the call timestamp, so if I'm going to show that, you can see there's the timestamp access, and then the SLA here as a line. And all I did was just hide the channel and hide the timestamp header, and there's my spark line. For the tree map, I brought in the channel for columns to, kind of still follow that uniformity of having a channel line. So as you go down each line for channel, you have the band, the spark line, the tree map, and then the bar chart. And then you can kind of see here that I broke it out by sentiment, and then looking at SLA and volume of calls for each one of these cohorts. A cohort represented by sentiment. So you can see here, uh, this tree map here on the left is the call center one, but then every color is represented by a sentiment. Here is the bottom view on the left side. So account ID, account of the ID, which is basically your volume of calls for each day. That's represented as a bar chart. And then the SLA percentage is represented as a Gantt line. So you can see all the orange lines. That's at the moment that basically saying from a distribution perspective, how many of those calls achieved that SLA percentage. So, for instance, 416 calls with a 73 percentage SLA percentage, represented by 305 of those calls. Now, there's other ways we could have done this. We could have set instead of the Gantt, we could have done a stacked chart. So basically saying, all right, well, everything underneath this line is blue, everything above it is gray. You could have done that on a dual bar chart, but I like this view better. It at least shows you kind of from a distribution perspective or a depth, kind of where the SLA is achieved. Here's your map. Two layers here, one state, one city, and then just a sized mark on calls for the city. And then I messed around with the. You see how the channel there? There's no channel. It just has a star, but that gets illuminated or that gets populated once you actually apply the dashboard action to kind of let you know what channel is being called out here or filtered out here. Since it's all channels, it's represented as a star. Here's the reason. Basically, the three reasons: billing question, payments, and service outage. Got my counts represented as a bar chart, and then my SLA percentage represented as a line. Lots of other things we could have done here. The data set itself. There's also call center here. So notice how there's a call center in Baltimore and Chicago, Denver, and LA. We could have looked at a bunch of things here: volume of call by call center, types of call handled by each of these call centers. We could have also looked at time. So let's say I wanted to create a quick view of volume of calls. So let's do ID here. Let's bring in the timestamp. Let's see if there's a way to show, if the dataset has it, is there a way to show time and I want to see if there's a way to show the date, time, and year. Access. This probably doesn't have any times in here. Let me go to describe real quick. Yeah, there's no times in there. So obviously, if this data set had time, we can kind of break out the time, get a sense of how the calls are being routed. Let's say, for instance, calls routed to LA are for those that are for East Coast times, since agents are working in earlier times in LA, they can handle those type of later calls, stuff like that for coverage. But yeah, real quick and simple. Call center dashboard. Did a few dashboard actions, so you can click on the channel, get a sense of web calls, how they're happening, emails, how performance is for emails across the nation, across each day. So real quick here, I like it. It's pretty simple. Um, there's definitely a lot more we can do with a more robust call center data set. For those of you that work with call center data set, I'd like to hear, how you utilize your data. What are the types of analysis that you put together? Some of the stuff I've done in the past is looking at conversion rates, creating a call into a sale, service rates, call duration, um, ranking of agents. Let's rank the top agents that convert the most sales. Those are your cream of the crop agents. Looking at sentiment analysis. But with that said, let me know what y'all think. Let's talk call center data, how you use data, how you manage it, and let's share some feedback. Let me know what y'all think of this. Check it out on my profile, and y'all take care.